as we've been through the session so far, we've talked a lot about the automation engine, our policy catalog, and it's a real differentiator. We use it for a ton of different use cases, not only just kind of producing recommendations for cost optimization, for security and operational best practices and reporting and all sorts of things. You saw examples or mentioned examples around currency conversion and other things, right? So it's a really powerful engine for driving automation of any kind. And this slide is probably the easiest way to kind of articulate the potential power of this. So using this engine, we can bring in data from any source. And most commonly, that is going to be the Flexera platform itself, right? So our own billing data or data from other modules in the platform, ITAM, SaaS manager costs, or whatever you wanted to do, or from the cloud vendor services themselves. Yeah. So all cloud services, by their very nature, are API enabled, and we can get data from them. You could also use internal systems, right? On-prem systems, Jira, change management systems, self-service platforms, whatever you wanted to do. But it can be really anything with an API that you want to get data from. The policy then takes that data or multiple data sources, so it can be more than one of those, and you can apply conditions to that, right? So you can, again, manipulate that data in any way you would see fit. So for the example of our currency conversion, the data source is an API-enabled system, a web service from xe.com, where we get the currency rates for a particular month. The policy itself is manipulating that data into a format that we can use, and then on the actions side, the API that is exposed for our adjustments is being used to apply that currency conversion. Okay, so that's one kind of use case that you may look to do. But the actions that we can take here could be emailing and notifying somebody of something's happened. We've produced a set of recommendations, we've raised a Jira ticket, we've applied currency conversion rate for the month, whatever it might be. Those are built in, right? Every policy will, if you put an email address in, generate an email notification and an incident report that goes with that. Also built in are approval workflows. So if I was to have a policy that produces a list of snapshots that are older than 30 days, that are potential candidates for delete, you could have an approval workflow that would say, do you want to go and delete these? Yes, no, click the button, off you go. Yeah. So again, that's built in, but it could be any action in any cloud, or indeed any API enabled service, right? I've got one of these fancy API, app-based coffee machines where you can switch your coffee machine on and make a cup of, coffee from your smartphone, right? I could literally write a policy that would, make me an espresso in the morning, because there's an API for it, right? So, any use case, particularly when we're starting to think about cloud. This becomes extremely powerful in certain use cases. The one that I like to share, customer examples, use a tagging strategy, and we'll come on and talk about tags in a little bit, but they only tag their infrastructure with one thing, which is called application ID. And we use the automation engine then to take that application ID and go and look up in their enterprise architecture tool, which they use RDoc, all of the other attributes that relate to that app ID. So the name of the application, the owner of it, the cost center that it should be charged to, and other attributes. And we then bring that into the platform. So what they've done is effectively simplify the whole nightmare of tag management by just using a key to another system that is far better for you to update. If I change the owner of an app, I just go and change it in RDoc, and it applies to everything. I don't have to go and remediate or change any of my tag data. Those kind of use cases, super, super powerful, right? But pretty much anything you could think of. Raise a Jira, raise a ServiceNow ticket. We have policies out of the box that will give you a list of resources that don't meet a tagging standard, and you can actually, through our UI, go and tag things in any cloud. really, really powerful, because when you're operating in a FinOps function, you might have a centralized team that are responsible for the kind of governance and management of the platform. They may not have access to go and tag resources in the AWS console or the Azure management console, but they can take those actions from within the platform. Ton of example policies that sit in the catalog, and we'll go and have a look at this in a minute rather than just looking at the slides. But as well as the kind of cost optimization use cases, producing a list of unused infrastructure or right sizing or commitment-based recommendations, we do alerting from it, right? I'm going over budget. I've forecast, spend has gone past budget. Anomaly detection, right? A service has been used. Someone's hacked my account and is Bitcoin mining out of one of my Amazon instances. The utilization of my commitments has dropped below a certain threshold, producing the recommendations, untagged resources, unattached volumes. We've kind of talked about those use cases. But we also use it to drive reporting, like delivering scheduled reports, telling you about long-running infrastructure, and security best practices like open buckets and other things, right? So you will find the catalog of public policies. The simplest place to go and find this, if I could find my mouse cursor, which is now got missing, is under the automation menu and under catalog, okay? And in here, you've got a filter on these of the different categories of policy that exist: compliance, best practices, cost, onboarding of customers, operational. Let's say the automation engine is included in any module of Flexera One that you purchase, right? So there are policies there for SaaS Manager. There are some things that we're doing with ITAM use cases as well. And you can go and search for stuff. So you want to go find the policies that we have for Google, for example, then there's actually pretty good feature parity here. One of the challenges in the vendor, third-party tool vendor space is, of course, as companies, they're following the spend, right? So the majority of the market share Amazon have, followed by Microsoft, followed by Google, and therefore, the focus on producing recommendations and helping customers manage cloud tends to be AWS first and so on. But where we can, we've covered the bases across all three hyperscalers. So there is a repository here. I'll give you a link to this. Yeah. And there's a good README document here in the public documentation. But this will be the most up-to-date place to go to, right? So we can publish from our services team, right? So this is a selection of them are supported by product, but a lot of this is delivered from services or from customers themselves around customer use cases. You'll see a lot of it focused on kind of multi-cloud cost reporting, the currency conversion use case that I talked about, ability to do forecasting, and we're going to cover a lot of these use cases as we go through the training over the couple of days. And then we start to break them out by cloud vendor, where you've got, use cases for compute and database recommendations, same for Azure, same for Google, and then there's security best practices and other things, right? So 150 things that you can do out of the box, but you can go and take any one of these. Idle compute, we'll have a look. The full set of permissions are documented here, okay? So when I talked about least privilege for setting up access to particular accounts and so on, then the permissions that each one needs are specified here, and then details of how the policy will work, how you can kind of configure that. And ultimately, if you want to go and have a look at it, the code that underpins this. But for anybody who's kind of got a little bit of kind of programming experience, these are reasonably easy to go and customize. I probably did my first policy within a couple of weeks of being at Flexera, which was something around producing reports for unit cost and unit economics. But the documentation is actually really, really good. There's a set of tools. There's a document that will take you through a walkthrough, effectively, of building your own policy out. There are some testing tools and other things that exist. So please do go and have a look at that. And then within the platform, you can then go into, under automation, there's policy templates here, where you've customized something, you can actually upload your own template, and it will appear then in the catalog of the tenant that you're operating with. And then within the platform, you can then go into under automation, there's policy templates here, where you've customized something, you can actually upload your own template and it will appear then in the catalog of the tenant that you're operating with. Okay, so lots of options to customize this. I'll give you an example that you might have with a customer, right? So when we produce right sizing recommendations, we need CPU, memory, disk data, right, in order to decide whether infrastructure is well used or not. Out of the box, that product, of course, will use that data from the cloud vendor. So there's services like CloudWatch or Azure Log Analytics, right, where that data is present. But other customers might use third-party tools, right? They might be using Datadog, Wavefront, there's a whole stack, Splunk or whatever it might be to gather that data. This would be where you could customize a policy, an existing one, and say, actually, rather than the cloud vendor, the metrics for this instance can be gathered from a different API, and you would pull that in, right? And again, we have customers that are using RDoc or something other than ServiceNow or Jira or whatever it might be, for their change management or their engineering tooling. And again, you can use this engine to customize and integrate with pretty much anything. We're going to go through some use cases for applying policies as we go through the rest of the training, right? So for, where we're talking about rate and usage reduction and budgeting and other things, we're always going to come back to this policy engine. But the point of having it at this point in the course is the majority of these use cases will be looking at the cloud vendor accounts. Okay, so if I was to go and look for AWS idle compute or Azure idle compute instances, that data doesn't exist in the bill. Okay, that data exists in the subscription or the account of the cloud vendor where that is running, and therefore the configuration steps that we're focused on today is about, well, how do I connect to and get that data? And this requires you to create additional credentials. Again, you'll find under your automation engine, automation menu, a credentials option